A locked box in Windsor, long untouched and shielded from public view. Inside, they say, lies a private document from Queen Elizabeth II, not seen by Parliament, not shared with her own son. In it, she names Catherine, Princess of Wales, not Charles or Camilla, as the true future monarch. Is this the Queen's final act of reform, or the beginning of a royal crisis unlike any other? Her monarchy has always existed at the intersection of myth and law, ceremony and secrecy. But this alleged revelation, quietly tucked away in a sealed compartment within Windsor Castle, may shatter the carefully crafted equilibrium. For decades, Queen Elizabeth II reigned as a figure of stability, dignity, and unmatched tradition. Her every move, every word, every silence, calculated to preserve the crown. And yet, if the whispers are true, her final act may be the most radical of her entire reign. It begins with the notion of a private clause, a sealed personal testament the Queen never intended for public eyes. Unlike her public declarations, this supposed document wasn't bound by protocol or passed through Parliament. Instead, it's said to be handwritten, intimate, direct, a message to the future, naming Catherine not merely as the wife of the heir, but as the sovereign the people should one day follow, a sovereign by virtue of trust, not bloodline, a monarch by character, not decree. Why now? Why Catherine? And why risk everything by creating such a dangerous ambiguity? The rumors aren't baseless fantasies conjured by tabloids alone. Over the past year, multiple royal insiders, some anonymously, others veiled behind close palace sources, have hinted at a private final wish by the late Queen. These murmurs became impossible to ignore when a retired courtier, in a now-deleted interview, spoke cryptically about Her Majesty's desire for the monarchy to evolve through steadier hands. What exactly did he mean? And why, after a lifetime of reigning by the book, would the Queen pen something that could rewrite history? Because what's at stake isn't just a family legacy, it's the entire foundation of Britain's monarchy. If the clause exists, it would call into question everything: the role of Parliament, the authority of the current king, and the future of royal titles themselves. It could trigger legal confusion, diplomatic unrest, and, most dangerously, fracture the royal family from within. And yet, beneath all this lies something even more compelling. Was this clause merely legal fantasy? Or was it born out of something deeply human: fear, love, regret? Could this be the Queen's quiet rebellion? Her last attempt to steer a centuries-old ship away from disaster by handing the wheel to the only woman she believed could save it. This isn't about a cold political maneuver. It's about legacy, yes, but also about redemption, perhaps even remorse. For the monarchy has survived wars, divorces, deaths, and abdications, but never has it faced the possibility that its own matriarch may have chosen to bypass her own blood. But before we get lost in titles and laws, we must go back to the secret bond between two women. One, a reigning monarch, the other, a queen in waiting. Long before the Queen passed, she held private, unscheduled meetings with Catherine, meetings that royal aides couldn't explain, and which were never logged officially. What did they talk about? Why was Camilla excluded? And could these very conversations hold the key to the Queen's alleged final wish? It wasn't just that Catherine was frequently seen entering the Queen's private quarters. It was how often she did so without announcement, and how often those meetings stretched for hours without a single word reaching the press. In a palace where schedules are meticulously planned and every movement is recorded for the record, these unmarked encounters stood out like shadows on stone. Not even senior courtiers, those closest to the daily operations of the monarchy, could explain why these meetings took place. They simply happened without fanfare or briefing, without Camilla, without Charles, and without the usual swarm of advisors. and as time passed, they became more frequent. Those closest to the monarchy began to whisper. There was a softness in the Queen's tone whenever Catherine's name came up, an ease that contrasted sharply with her more guarded expressions around others. From their earliest interactions, the Queen and Catherine shared something rare in royal circles, a genuine affection, while others had to earn Elizabeth's trust through decades of service or perfect discretion. Catherine seemed to walk into it naturally. The Queen, who once kept even her own children at a ceremonial distance, appeared unusually open with her granddaughter-in-law. Some staff even described her as mentoring Catherine not just in public conduct, but in matters that extended far deeper: diplomacy, duty, and most importantly, legacy. This bond became even more noticeable in comparison to Camilla. Despite being the wife of the future king and elevated to queen consort after years of careful PR maneuvering, Camilla never managed to close the emotional distance between herself and the monarch. Their relationship was professional, respectful, but cold. There were no long, unguarded conversations, no surprises, no secret handoffs of tradition. Camilla had titles. Catherine had trust. That difference didn't go unnoticed by royal watchers. For years, speculation brewed that Catherine was being prepared for more than just the role of consort. She was being groomed for what? No one dared say out loud. But the signs were there. The Queen loaning her treasured family jewels only reserved for sovereigns in waiting, including pieces once worn by Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. She was chosen to represent the monarchy during pivotal moments: funerals, hospital visits, Commonwealth engagements, times when only the most trusted were sent, and always the Queen watched her closely. Not to monitor, but to mold. This wasn't just admiration. It was something deeper, something calculated, something strategic. And so, the question must be asked: what if those private meetings weren't simply about royal bonding or gentle mentorship? What if they were the Queen's quiet way of crafting her own succession plan? Away from the scrutiny of Parliament, away from tradition, and away from the very institution she had served for 70 years. What if, in those quiet hours, the Queen made her choice not for the next in line, but for the one she believed could truly carry the crown into the future? And if the Queen did trust Catherine that deeply, deeply enough to bypass tradition, what does it say about the Queen's hopes and her fears for the monarchy's future? The British monarchy is built on precedent and law, but what happens when a queen's final wish goes against all of it? What happens when the woman who ruled for 70 years whispers, "Not my son, not his wife, her"? At the center of this growing storm lies a single, silent document. It isn't stamped with royal seals or passed through parliamentary hands. It was never meant for public release, but according to those who claim to have caught whispers of its contents, it carries a message so powerful it could fracture the monarchy itself. A private letter, perhaps a codicil attached to the Queen's personal will, where Elizabeth II reportedly expresses her desire for Catherine, not Charles, not Camilla, to be the one who ultimately guides the crown forward, not as a consort, not as a symbolic figure, but as the monarch in her own right. To understand the depth of this bombshell, we must first acknowledge one immutable fact. The monarch does not control the line of succession. The path to the throne is not dictated by a sovereign's preferences, but by laws passed by Parliament, rooted in centuries of constitutional evolution. From the Act of Settlement of 1701 to the succession to the Crown Act of 2013, the rules have been written in ink, not feeling. A monarch cannot simply rewrite the line with a final word, no matter how long or glorious their reign. And yet, this is where things begin to twist. Because, while such a clause may hold no legal weight, its symbolic power is undeniable. The British monarchy thrives not merely on paperwork and legalities, but on perception, legacy, and tradition. If Elizabeth II, in her final words, signaled Catherine as her true successor, even if only as a private wish, it would be a seismic cultural moment, one that would send shockwaves through the royal household, the government, and the public at large. It would be a gesture dripping in meaning, a challenge to bloodline, to bureaucracy, and to the very institution she spent her life protecting. Royal historians have warned about this exact kind of moment, when a monarch's private intent is allowed to seep into public expectation. They call it the gray area of power, where sentiment begins to influence policy, where affection begins to shape governance. And in this case, it raises a chilling question. If a queen's dying wish contradicts the law of the land, who truly holds the power, parliament or legacy? This debate, legacy versus legality, is no longer theoretical. If the Queen truly wrote such a clause, even in confidence, then the emotional authority behind her words may prove more explosive than any constitutional argument. And that emotional power could change everything, especially if the people, already enamored with Catherine, begin to demand the future the Queen envisioned. Behind all of this, the whispers, the speculation, the debate brews a darker undercurrent, a fault line forming within the family itself, because this isn't just legal chaos, it's emotional warfare, and it begins with one woman, the Queen trusted more than anyone else. Camilla may be queen by title, but Catherine was queen by heart, at least to Elizabeth. The Queen saw something in Kate, grace under pressure, moral resolve, a rare ability to walk among people and still carry the crown with dignity. The difference between the two women was stark from the beginning. Camilla's journey into the royal spotlight was born of scandal, marked by years of public resentment and the long shadow of Princess Diana. She was never fully embraced, not by the press, not by the public, and not, it seemed, by the Queen. Despite every effort to rehabilitate Camilla's image, the whispers never faded, and the tension never fully lifted. The Queen, ever the master of quiet signals, never offered the same emotional closeness to Camilla that she did to Catherine. Not in gestures, not in presence, and certainly not in trust. Catherine, on the other hand, rose without resistance. Her path was not spotless because it was easy. It was spotless because she made it so. She entered the royal family, not as a firebrand or disruptor, but as a calm, steady force. There were no scandals, no late-night confrontations with the press, no sudden lapses in decorum. Everything she did was deliberate, thoughtful, and always in service to the institution, not herself. Her loyalty to Prince William was never in question. Her family values were clear, and her bond with the Queen, slowly but unmistakably, deepened with time. To Elizabeth, who lived her entire life upholding the value of duty above all, Catherine's quiet resilience would have stood out. Here was a woman who understood restraint, who knew when to speak and when to stay silent. A woman who, like Elizabeth herself, was willing to bear the weight of expectation without complaint. That kind of commitment, the ability to carry burdens without needing applause, was the very thing Elizabeth believed made a monarch worthy of the crown. There was also something more emotional. Many saw in Catherine the qualities of a younger Elizabeth, poised, elegant, firm in private, yet soft-spoken in public. Others drew comparisons to Diana, not in appearance, but in the way she connected with the people. Catherine's ability to remain both regal and relatable was no small feat. It was a rare balance the Queen knew the crown desperately needed moving forward. Above all, it was the trust that defined her. Catherine never leaked a word. In a world of betrayals and backroom deals, she remained a vault. No matter what was said behind closed doors, it stayed there. No matter what pressure mounted in public, she never let it break her. That kind of silence, the dignified kind, is something Elizabeth valued above all else. And perhaps this is why the Queen, in her final moments, chose to elevate character over convention. To pass the torch not to the next in line, but to the one she believed could carry it without letting it fall. Because maybe, just maybe, Elizabeth saw in Catherine the monarch the world needed next. Not because she was entitled, but because she had earned it. But not everyone agrees with that vision, and what's rising behind palace walls now is nothing short of civil war. As whispers of the Queen's secret will circulate, so do tensions behind palace gates. On one side, William and Catherine, quiet, composed. On the other, Charles and Camilla, furious, blindsided. The crown is still on the king's head, but the real battle is being fought behind the scenes. The moment the rumors surfaced, claims that Queen Elizabeth had named Catherine as her preferred successor, something shifted behind the palace walls. What had long simmered under royal smiles and rehearsed unity finally began to crack. It wasn't just a rumor, it was a threat, not to the throne itself, but to the fragile power balance that held the royal household together. Charles, long waiting in the Queen's shadow, had assumed his time had finally come. But now there were whispers too loud to ignore that his reign was merely a placeholder. But the people, and perhaps the Queen herself, saw Catherine as the true heir to the future. Behind closed doors, the tension between father and son reportedly reached an uncomfortable pitch. While no public words were exchanged, private conversations turned icy. The Queen's alleged final wish had turned a sacred bloodline into a battleground, and in Camilla's circle the mood was even more volatile. To be publicly honored as Queen Consort, only to be privately passed over, was not just humiliating, it was devastating. From whispers within Clarence House, sources spoke of Camilla feeling betrayed, humiliated, even undermined. She had spent decades clawing her way into public acceptance, and now, with a single alleged document, her place in the future was being questioned, if not erased. Inside Buckingham and Kensington, the staff knew what was happening, even if no one dared speak of it openly. Lines were being drawn in silence. Some aides, long loyal to Charles and his version of continuity, doubled down in their service. But others, inspired by Catherine's calm, dignified strength, began to quietly shift their allegiance. They saw where public affection was trending. They saw who the Queen had trusted. They saw who people wanted. And they weren't blind to the writing, appearing, however faintly, on the walls. Even in public the tension bled through. Others, once marked by subtle harmony, now felt cold and transactional. Glances avoided, smiles strained. The choreography remained, but the warmth was gone. And in this world, where every movement is scrutinized, the silence was louder than any outburst. Buckingham Palace has said nothing, not a denial, not a confirmation, nothing. But that silence itself is now a strategy, an effort to contain a narrative that is rapidly slipping out of their hands, and so the question lingers in the air like storm clouds over the Thames. Is this the beginning of a slow-motion coup within the crown? Not one fueled by guns or rebellion, but by loyalty, perception, and quiet defiance? But the royal family isn't just dealing with an internal rift. The people are watching, and their hearts may already have chosen their queen. She didn't need a throne or a title to become queen. In the eyes of millions, Catherine already is. From global headlines to royal forums, one message echoes louder each day. Let her lead. For years, the public has watched her closely, carefully, sometimes skeptically. But unlike so many others who've stepped into the royal spotlight, Catherine never stumbled. She never chased attention. She never courted drama. Instead, she earned respect in the oldest way possible, by showing up, by enduring, by carrying herself with quiet grace. And now, across the UK and beyond, her name has risen above protocol. not just as a princess, but as the people's queen. Poll after poll tells the same story. When asked who they trust most within the royal family, the answer is almost always the same: Catherine. Not Charles, not Camilla, not even William. There's something about her that resonates far beyond titles and tradition. She embodies stability in an era that craves it, calm in a palace at war. Her approval ratings reflect not just admiration, but a yearning for something different, something better. A hierarchy that feels less distant, a leader who feels more human. The admiration only grew when Catherine vanished briefly from public life, only to return with raw honesty about her health. No grand spectacle, no rehearsed drama, just courage. Her choice to reveal her battle with cancer stunned the world, not because of what she said, but how she said it. With dignity, with poise, with no self-pity. In doing so, she reminded everyone watching that royalty isn't about wearing crowns, it's about bearing burdens without breaking. And the world noticed. Videos of her comforting grieving children, exchanging glances with William during solemn ceremonies, or standing strong at national events without saying a word, went viral not because they were flashy, but because they were real. In a sea of royal scandal and cynicism, Catherine became the rate constant, the image of duty not as performance, but as devotion. In contrast, the public's unease with Camilla still lingers. Her presence, though increasingly normalized, remains haunted by memories of Diana. The ghost of the people's princess has never truly faded, and in that shadow, comparisons are inevitable and often unkind. Where Camilla seems to carry the weight of controversy, Catherine seems to carry the promise of healing. The media, too, has shifted. Catherine is no longer just a royal figure. She's a cultural icon, a symbol of what the monarchy could be if it dared to adapt. Editorials call her the future. Front pages celebrate her resilience. Even critics of the monarchy find themselves softening when her name enters the conversation. She has become something rare and universally admired in a deeply divided world. And so, a new kind of crown is being formed, not made of gold or tradition, but of love, loyalty, and the public's unwavering belief that she is the rightful future. The monarchy may be bound by law, but real power has always rested in perception. And the perception now is clear. Catherine is already wearing the invisible crown. But what happens when public sentiment, palace intrigue, and a queen's secret wish all point in one direction, yet the law stands in the way? This isn't just about emotion anymore. This is about power. Can a piece of paper, locked in a royal box, shatter a centuries-old chain of succession? At the heart of this storm lies a question few have dared to answer aloud. Can the Queen's hidden will, if it exists, truly change the course of monarchy? On paper, the answer is no. The British line of succession isn't a private affair. It's defined by law specifically, by acts of Parliament. From the Bill of Rights in 1689 to the more recent succession to the Crown Act of 2013, the rules are clear. The crown passes down a predetermined line, and no monarch, not even one as revered as Elizabeth I, can rewrite that lineage with a stroke of a personal pen. So then, why does this alleged clause carry so much weight? Because in the world of monarchy, symbolism is everything. A monarch's blessing, even unofficial, can echo louder than the law. While Queen Elizabeth may not have had the legal authority to alter the succession, a heartfelt written desire for Catherine to take the lead carries immense emotional and cultural force. It sends a message that Parliament, the palace, and the public would find impossible to ignore. And in Britain, where tradition bends but rarely breaks, such symbolic gestures can set the stage for something far more powerful than a statute, a movement. If the Queen's final wish aligns with the rising public sentiment, the pressure on Parliament could become unbearable. Regents may no longer govern politically, but they still shape the identity of the nation. And if the identity the people now crave is embodied, not by Charles or Camilla, but by Catherine, then legal gears, slow and ancient as they are, may begin to turn in her favor. It wouldn't be the first time the rules shifted to meet the will of the people. History holds its own secrets, abdications, compromises, rewritten protocols. Tradition has made room before, when the cost of clinging to tradition became too high. But even the suggestion of rewriting succession is a dangerous game. Such a move would unleash a storm of political tension, party divisions, and ideological battles between monarchists and modernists. The very foundation of constitutional monarchy could be called into question. Would this be a victory for reform, or the beginning of its unraveling? Would it strengthen the crown, or expose its vulnerabilities? And would Catherine, shouldering the weight of both public adoration and constitutional controversy, even want to rule under such conditions? Because what lies ahead isn't just a legal debate, it's a test of Britain's identity. Are titles sacred and unmovable? Or do they evolve with the will of the people? If Parliament entertains even the discussion of this hidden will, it risks opening a door to something no one in the palace truly wants: uncertainty. And uncertainty, in the world of royalty, is the one thing more dangerous than scandal. The crown has always stood for order, but the Queen's final whisper may have lit a fuse of revolution. 3 paths lie ahead: one where Charles rules and tradition wins, one where the Queen's wish is honored and Catherine is crowned, and one where the monarchy fractures under the weight of its own secrets. The first path is the one most expected and perhaps most feared. Charles remains king. Camilla stays by his side. The machinery of monarchy continues to grind forward untouched. No changes, no reform, no reckoning. It's the path of least resistance, but also the path with the highest risk of detachment. Public disillusionment, already simmering, could begin to boil. Those of favoritism, cover-ups, and ignored last wishes may linger like poison in the air. This route may preserve the law, but it may lose the people. And a crown without its people is a relic, not a reign. Then there is the second scenario, the unthinkable until now. Parliament, under pressure from mounting public opinion and the Queen's alleged written intent, intervenes. Symbolic reform is introduced. Catherine is elevated not through scandal, not through force, but through consensus. She becomes the monarch not by bloodline, but by public will. It's a bold move, one that would redefine succession for the modern age. Some would call it historic, others heresy, but make no mistake, this is not a fairy tale ending. It would come at a cost: political battles, generational divides, and a monarchy forever changed from its original design. Yet in this version, the institution doesn't fall apart. It evolves, and then, the darkest possibility is the third and final road. A fallout too explosive to contain. A palace that pretends nothing happened while the world outside sees everything. In this version, silence breeds suspicion. The public begins to doubt. Trust crumbles. Anti-monarchist voices, long drowned out, find new strength. The Queen's unacknowledged wish becomes a symbol not of continuity, but of suppression. And in time, the weight of ignored truth shatters the crown's credibility. The result isn't Catherine or Charles, it's chaos, a nation torn between heritage and progress. A monarchy no longer seen as sacred, but obsolete. The signs of what's to come are already creeping in. Watch Catherine's movements. If she begins taking on more symbolic power, appearing at high-level state functions, representing the crown abroad, shouldering responsibilities beyond her current role, it may signal a shift in the wind. Listen for Buckingham's silence to break, for leaks to surface, for documents to emerge. The tipping point may not arrive with an announcement, but with a whisper. Timing is everything. Act too soon and the crown looks desperate. Act too late, and it may be too broken to save. This is a chess game, where every move must be calculated with precision. One wrong step, and centuries of tradition could collapse like a house of cards. And at the heart of it all lies one question, unanswered, and echoing across the corridors of power. Was the Queen's final act one of love, desperation, or revolution? And so, the world waits, not for a coronation, but for the truth. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.